The 30th day arrived with tension hanging over the Nexus station like a storm waiting to break. The Accord of Clarity would officially end at the close of the session, and the Council would face its most important decision in 3,000 years. Would they return to traditional diplomacy, or would they make the changes permanent? The chamber filled early. Every delegation attended, including the 3 species that had withdrawn from the experiment. They wanted to witness the outcome even if they disagreed with the process. Chairman Thelvos looked older than he had 30 days ago. The experiment had aged him, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about the system he had helped maintain for centuries. But there was also something different in his eyes, something that might have been hope. The Accord of Clarity ends today, Thelvos announced. We must decide what comes next. The chair opens the floor for discussion. Kelton stood first. Everyone expected him to call for a return to traditional methods. Instead, he surprised them. I led the opposition to this experiment. I believed humans were disrupting our carefully balanced system. I was correct about the disruption, but wrong about its value. This system needed disruption. It was dying quietly, slowly becoming irrelevant as we avoided every difficult truth. He turned to face the human delegation. Ambassador Hugh, your silence was an act of violence against our traditions. Your honesty was worse. You forced us to see ourselves clearly, and we did not like what we saw. I should hate you for this. Kelton paused, his massive form tense. But I don't. My species values strength, and you have shown us that real strength is not in clever words that avoid commitment. It is in simple words that bind you to action. I vote to make these changes permanent. Shocked murmurs ran through the chamber. If Kelton supported permanence, the vote might actually pass. A Lumen representative floated forward. I wish to express gratitude to the humans. For 300 years, we carried pain from the destruction of our meditation station. We covered that pain with diplomatic language about understanding and moving forward. But the pain remained. This experiment allowed us to finally address it. The Velcris acknowledged truth. We received genuine restitution. The wound has begun to heal. More delegates spoke in favor, but not everyone agreed. An elder delegate from a species called the Eternal Archive stood. They were one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, with records spanning 5,000 years. I respect what has been accomplished, the Archive delegate said, but I fear what has been lost. Diplomatic language exists for important reasons. It allows us to disagree without declaring war. It provides ways to save face while making concessions. It creates space for compromise. What you call avoiding truth, we call maintaining stability. This sparked the real debate. Breathen responded, You speak of stability, but is it real stability if it rests on unaddressed grievances and unenforceable agreements? We have had peace, yes, but it was peace maintained through mutual pretense. The moment someone challenged that pretense by simply refusing to speak, the entire system nearly collapsed. Perhaps, the Archive delegate conceded, but your new system is brutal. Not all species can handle such directness. Some of our cultures value harmony over honesty. You ask us to change fundamental aspects of how we interact. Hayek stood to speak. All eyes turned to him. The Archive delegate raises valid concerns. I want to be clear about something. Humans are not advocating for brutal honesty in all circumstances. We understand that different situations require different approaches. What we oppose is systematic meaninglessness masquerading as communication. He activated a display showing a proposed new framework. We are not suggesting you abandon all diplomatic protocol. We suggest a dual system. Formal negotiations and binding agreements must use clear, enforceable language. Everyone must understand exactly what they are committing to, with no hidden clauses or vague terms. Mirai continued the explanation. However, informal discussions and cultural exchanges can maintain the social graces that help species coexist comfortably. Politeness and courtesy serve valuable purposes. The problem was never politeness. The problem was using polite language to avoid meaningful commitment. Taeyang added, Among humans, we have a saying, say what you mean when it matters, and be kind when you can. The council was being kind when nothing mattered, which meant nothing ever truly got resolved. The framework appeared on screens throughout the chamber. It outlined 2 modes of communication. Mode 1 for negotiations requiring clear commitment, direct language, defined terms, and forcible promises. Mode 2 for social and cultural interactions, Traditional diplomatic courtesy with understood flexibility. Thelvos studied the proposal carefully. This is a compromise between the old way and the new way. Yes, Hyuk agreed. We learned during our own history that extreme positions rarely work. Complete honesty without tact destroys relationships. Complete diplomacy without honesty destroys trust. The solution is knowing when each approach is appropriate. A younger delegate from the Drift colony spoke up. I support this. My species initially opposed the experiment, but we have seen the benefits. Our trade disputes are resolved faster. Our agreements actually mean something. But I also appreciate having spaces where we can interact without constant intensity. This framework provides both. Brethen conducted a quick survey of the delegates using his data systems. 37 species indicate support for the dual framework. 8 oppose. 2 are undecided. The support was stronger than anyone expected. The 30 days had changed perspectives more than they realized. Kelton asked the question everyone was thinking. If we adopt this system, will the humans stay? Will you continue to participate in the council? Hyuk looked at his delegation. Mirai nodded. Taeyang smiled. They had all agreed on this answer before the session began. Yes, we will stay, but understand something. We will hold you accountable. If the council slips back into meaningless communication, we will call it out. If treaties become full of loopholes again, we will challenge them. We will be uncomfortable neighbors because we believe words should matter. Good, Kelton said simply. We need uncomfortable neighbors. We have been too comfortable for too long. Chairman Thelvos called for the final vote. The question was simple. Adopt the new dual framework system permanently or return to traditional methods. The voting began. Tension filled the chamber as the results appeared one by one. When the final count displayed, there was silence. 41 species voted yes. 6 voted no. The new system had passed with overwhelming support. Thelvos spoke quietly, his voice carrying weight. The motion passes. From this day forward, the Galactic Council will operate under the new accord. Binding agreements will be clear and enforceable. Social interactions will maintain diplomatic courtesy, and we will all remember that words carry weight, or they should not be spoken. He turned to Hyuk. Ambassador, you and your delegation spent 6 months in silence. You forced us to confront uncomfortable truths. You showed us that our system was broken by simply refusing to participate in its dysfunction. On behalf of the Council, I thank you. And I also tell you that I came very close to hating you for it. Hyuk bowed respectfully. I understand. Sometimes the greatest service we can provide is to force others to face what they have been avoiding. It does not make us popular, but it is necessary. The session ended with something unprecedented. Genuine applause. Species that rarely expressed emotion physically participated. The sound echoed through the chamber, celebrating not just the decision but the courage it took to change. As delegates filed out, Jiwon approached Mirai. So it worked. Your silence, the experiment, everything worked. Mirai smiled. It worked because the council was ready to change, even if they did not know it yet. Sometimes people need someone to speak truth, and sometimes they need someone to stop speaking entirely. Both can break through deception, if done at the right moment. In the human quarters that evening, the delegation celebrated quietly. They had accomplished their mission. The galaxy would communicate differently now, more honestly, with real accountability. Hyuk stood at the window looking out at the stars. He thought about Earth, about the painful lessons humanity had learned through centuries of conflict and rebuilding. Those lessons had value beyond their own world. They could help an entire galaxy avoid the same mistakes. Taeyang joined him at the window. Do you think it will last? The changes, some will last, some will fade, but the Council can never go back to complete pretense. They have seen what direct communication can accomplish. Even if they slip backward sometimes, they will remember this month. Across the station, in his private office, Chairman Thelvos prepared a message to be sent throughout the galaxy. It would inform all member worlds of the changes. As he composed the message, he followed the new rules, clear, direct, honest. The message was only 3 paragraphs long. It said exactly what it meant. And for the first time in his long career, Thelvos felt that his words actually mattered. The Galactic Council had descended into chaos when humans refused to talk. But from that chaos came something better. A system where words carried weight, where honesty was valued over performance, and where silence could speak louder than all the diplomatic speeches in the galaxy. The vote took place exactly 1 week later. The chamber was packed with delegates, observers, and journalists from across the galaxy. Even species that had withdrawn their ambassadors sent representatives to witness the decision. Chairman Thelvos called for order, his 6 arms moving in formal patterns. The proposal before us is the Accord of Clarity, presented by the human delegation. 30 days of direct, honest communication without traditional diplomatic protocols. Those in favor? The voting display lit up. Species cast their votes through secure channels. The results appeared slowly, one by one, building tension in the chamber. When the final count displayed, the chamber erupted. The motion had passed by exactly 3 votes. 25 species voted yes, 22 voted no. It was one of the closest votes in council history. Kelton stood immediately. This is madness. We are abandoning traditions that have served us for millennia. Or, Brethan countered, we are finally acknowledging that those traditions were failing us. Thelvos raised his primary arms for silence. The motion passes. The Accord of Clarity will govern council communications for the next 30 days. Ambassador Hugh, your delegation will participate? Hugh stood and spoke for only the 2nd time in 7 months. We will. Thank you for your courage. The experiment began the following day. The first session under the new rules was disaster. Ambassador Hugh and Mirai sat at a special table designated for facilitators. They had agreed to help guide conversations, teaching other species the communication techniques humans had developed. A trade dispute between the Mytharians and a species called the Ven was the first issue. Under normal protocols, the discussion would have taken weeks of careful language about mutual respect and shared prosperity. Instead, it took 15 minutes. The Ven representative, a creature with crystalline wings, spoke first. The Mytharians owe us 3 shipments of processed metals. They have delivered none. We want to know when we will receive what we were promised. The Mytharian delegate, Korthos, looked uncomfortable. Under the old rules, he would have explained delays using elaborate language about unforeseen complications and complex supply chains. Instead, he had to tell the truth. We do not have the metals. We never had them. We agreed to the trade hoping we could acquire them from another source, but that source fell through. We have been stalling. The chamber went silent. Such direct admission of failure was unheard of. So you lied, the Ven representative said flatly. Yes. According to human definitions, we lied. And what will you do about it? Korthos looked at the humans. Mirai nodded encouragingly. We will pay fair compensation for the breach. We will also admit publicly that we failed to honor our agreement. The Ven representative considered this acceptable, but we want it in writing clearly with no loopholes. They drafted a new agreement right there with Hayuk's help. It was half a page long. Both sides understood it perfectly. The dispute was resolved, but that was the easy one. The second week brought harder conversations. A Lumen diplomat raised an ancient grievance with the Velcris. 300 years ago, a Velcris military vessel had destroyed a Lumen meditation station during a border skirmish. The Velcris had apologized using traditional diplomatic language, but never actually acknowledged wrongdoing. Under the Accord of Clarity, the Lumen delegation demanded a real answer. Did you intentionally target our station, or was it an accident? Kelton represented the Velcris. He clearly did not want to answer, but he had voted in favor of the experiment. He had to follow its rules. It was intentional. Our commanders considered your station a military target because it monitored our ship movements. We apologized in a way that sounded sincere without admitting guilt. We were never held accountable. The Lumen representative's geometric form flickered with distress. 300 years of peace based on a lie. Yes, Kelton admitted. His voice carried shame, an emotion rarely heard from Velcris warriors. Taeyang, the younger human diplomat, spoke up. This is where human conflict resolution differs from your traditions. Among humans, we learned that unaddressed grievances poison relationships. The Lumens are angry and they have a right to be. But Kelton has just done something remarkable. He told the truth, knowing it would hurt his people's reputation. That takes courage. The Lumen representatives seemed to consider this. What would humans do in this situation? We would acknowledge the harm, make appropriate restitution, and commit to changed behavior moving forward. Not as punishment, but as restoration, The goal is not to continue pain, but to end it. The discussion continued for hours. Eventually, the Velcris agreed to fund the rebuilding of the meditation station and to formally apologize without diplomatic language. The Lumens agreed to accept this restitution and move forward. It was messy and emotional and uncomfortable, but it worked. By the third week, something unexpected was happening. Species that had been enemies for generations were having real conversations. A Velcris warrior and a Matharian scholar discovered they both loved a particular form of mathematics. Without diplomatic masks, they found common ground. Small disputes that had festered for decades got resolved in single sessions. When everyone stopped hiding behind elaborate language, problems became simpler to solve. Not easier, but simpler. However, not everything went smoothly. 3 species withdrew from the experiment entirely, finding the honesty too brutal. Several delegates had emotional breakdowns when forced to confront uncomfortable truths about their own species' behavior. The Council's diplomatic corps was in chaos. Translators struggled with the new style of communication. Protocol officers found their skills obsolete. Traditional diplomats felt insulted by the directness of the new approach. Jiwan watched it all from her position as support staff. She had become friendly with Mireille, who occasionally explained human communication philosophy during meal deliveries. "Is this how humans always talk?" Jiwan asked one day. Mireille smiled. "Not always. Humans can be just as deceptive as any species. But our history taught us the cost of beautiful lies. We had propaganda that convinced people to hate each other. We had politicians who spoke eloquently while meaning nothing. We nearly destroyed ourselves. How did you change? Painfully. After our worst conflicts, we built new communication systems. We taught children to ask for clarity. We made transparency a value instead of a weakness. It took generations, and we still struggle with it. But we learned that trust requires honesty, even when honesty is uncomfortable." Back in the council chamber, Chairman Thelvos called for a mid-experiment review. 23 days had passed. 7 days remained. "We have resolved more disputes in 3 weeks than we typically resolve in 3 years, Thelvos reported. However, the process has been traumatic for many delegates. Some are calling for an early end to the experiment. Breathen stood to speak. "I have participated in galactic diplomacy for 60 years. I thought I was good at my job. This experiment has shown me I was good at performing diplomacy, not at actually solving problems. It has been difficult, yes, but it has also been more effective than anything I have experienced." A delegate from the drift colonies added, "My species voted against this experiment. I want to admit that I was wrong. We have learned more about our galactic neighbors in 3 weeks than in 3 centuries. The honesty is harsh, but it is also liberating." Even Kelton, who had been skeptical, spoke up. "I am a warrior. I value strength and honor. I initially saw this human approach as weakness, but I now understand that speaking truth requires more courage than speaking carefully crafted lies. The humans showed strength by sitting silent for 6 months. We can show strength by speaking plainly for 7 more days." Hyuk listened to all of this with quiet satisfaction. The experiment was working, though not without pain.
That was expected.
Real change always hurt. The final week would determine whether the Council could maintain this new approach permanently, or whether they would slip back into comfortable deception once the 30 days ended. The Galactic Council was falling apart. In the 3 weeks since Breathen delivered his report, the situation had grown worse. 2 more species had withdrawn their ambassadors, claiming they could not negotiate in good faith, while the humans sat in silent judgment. Trade agreements collapsed as species began questioning whether any deal meant what it claimed to mean. Border patrols had increased in 6 sectors, a sign that old tensions were resurfacing. War Prime Kelton had been gathering support for his motion to expel humanity. He stood before the council now, his massive form dominating the chamber floor. 45 species managed to coexist peacefully before the humans arrived, Kelton declared. Now, after just 1 year of their presence, we face our worst crisis in centuries. The evidence is clear. They are destabilizing the council through psychological warfare. Several delegates voiced their agreement. The Matharian representative stood and added, "Our economic partnerships are crumbling. Species are refusing to honor contracts, claiming the terms are too vague." This suspicion began with the humans. A small floating creature from the drift colonies spoke in a high-pitched voice. We have heard nothing from Earth in 7 months. No cultural broadcasts, no scientific exchanges, no casual communication. Only silence. This is not the behavior of a peaceful species. Chairman Thelvos tried to maintain order, but even his patience was exhausted. His 6 arms moved in gestures of frustration as he called for quiet. The chair recognizes Counselor. Brethen, Thelvos announced, hoping the investigator might have new information. Brethen stood, his compound eyes scanning the chamber. I have completed my investigation. The humans are not conducting psychological warfare. They are conducting a protest. A protest? Kelton laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the translation matrix. Against what? Against us. Against the way we communicate. They believe our diplomatic language is designed to avoid truth rather than express it. The chamber erupted. Species shouted over each other, some in anger, others in confusion. A few delegates looked uncomfortable, as if Brethen had voiced something they had secretly wondered about themselves. Thelvos restored order by activating the chamber's volume limiters. Enough, Counselor Brethen, do you have evidence of this? Only circumstantial. But consider this. The humans stopped talking immediately after the Confluence Summit, where we displayed our greatest diplomatic achievements. What if they saw something we did not? What if they realized our treaties and agreements are elaborate performances that bind no one? That is outrageous, a delegate shouted. Is it? Brethen produced a holographic display. I reviewed the treaties we celebrated at the summit. Every single one contains loopholes, vague definitions, and escape clauses. We congratulated ourselves for maintaining peace, but perhaps we have only maintained the appearance of peace. The chamber fell uncomfortably silent. Even Kelton had no immediate response. Finally, a voice spoke from the human section. Every head turned in shock. May I address the council? Ambassador Hugh stood at his seat. After 6 months of silence, his voice sounded strange to ears that had forgotten what he sounded like. It was calm, measured, and clear. Thelvos nearly fell from his platform in surprise. Ambassador Hugh, yes, you have the floor, please speak. Hugh walked to the central podium with Mirai beside him. The entire chamber held its breath. I apologize for our silence, Hayek began. It has caused distress, and that was regrettable though necessary. You deserve an explanation. He activated his own holographic display. It showed excerpts from the treaties Brethen had mentioned, with specific passages highlighted. 7 months ago, my team completed an analysis of galactic diplomacy. What we found disturbed us deeply. In 3,000 years, this council has perfected the art of talking without saying anything meaningful. Angry voices rose, but Hayek continued speaking over them. The Velcris Peace Treaty allows war through its cultural defense clause. The Matharian Resource Sharing Agreement shares nothing. The Lumen Clarity Accords are so complex that no 2 species interpret them the same way. These are not aberrations. This is how the Council operates. You insult our traditions, a delegate shouted. I state facts, Hayek replied. Humans come from a world that nearly ended itself through beautiful lies and persuasive deceptions. We rebuilt our civilization on a simple principle. Words must mean something or they should not be spoken. When we realized this council had abandoned that principle, we chose silence over participation in the deception. Mirai stepped forward and activated a dampening field. Suddenly, no one could speak except those at the central podium. The chamber fell into forced silence, giving them all a taste of what the humans had experienced for months. You are angry, Hyuk continued. You feel judged. Good. That anger means you understand at least partially what we are trying to tell you. Your communication system is broken. You have created a diplomatic theater where everyone performs sincerity without requiring actual honesty. He deactivated the dampening field, allowing response. Kelton was the first to speak, his voice dangerous. And what would you have us do, human? Speak with brutal honesty about every grievance and suspicion? That path leads to war, not peace. Perhaps, Hayuk acknowledged. Or perhaps your current path leads to a slower, quieter kind of destruction. You have peace, but you do not have trust. You have agreements, but you do not have accountability. You have 3,000 years of tradition built on avoiding uncomfortable truths. Chairman Thelvo spoke carefully. What are you proposing, Ambassador? An experiment. 30 days of complete honesty. No diplomatic language. No elaborate metaphors. No face-saving protocols. Just direct, clear communication about what each species needs, fears, and wants. If it fails, we will leave the Council voluntarily. If it succeeds, perhaps we can build something better together. The chamber exploded into argument. Some species called the proposal insane. Others found it intriguing. Still, others sat in silent contemplation, perhaps recognizing something true in Hyuk's words. Brethen spoke up again. I support this proposal. We have nothing to lose by trying. Our current system is already failing. You ask us to abandon 3,000 years of carefully developed diplomatic protocols, Thelvo said. This is not a small thing. No, Hyuk agreed. It is an enormous thing. But small things will not fix what is broken here. You called this council into emergency session because humans refuse to talk. I tell you now, we will speak again, but only if you agree to truly listen. Not to our words, but to our meaning. Not to our performances, but to our truths. Mireille handed him a document. We have prepared a proposed Accord of Clarity. It outlines guidelines for direct communication. It is only 3 pages long, compared to your typical 200-page treaties. It says exactly what it means with no hidden clauses. Hyuk placed the document on the central display for all to see. It was shockingly simple. It defined basic communication rules. Say what you mean what you say, and accept accountability for your words. We will vote in 1 week, Thelvos announced. This council will decide whether to accept this experiment. Ambassador Hyuk, your delegation will remain silent until then? Yes, Hyuk said. We have said what needed to be said. The rest is up to you. The human delegation returned to their seats. The chamber slowly emptied, species leaving in worried clusters. Jiwon watched from the observation gallery. She had witnessed history, though she was not sure whether it was the beginning of something better or the end of something ancient. The humans had finally spoken, and their words had shaken the foundation of galactic civilization. The question now was whether that foundation would collapse or transform into something stronger. Counselor Brethen did not sleep the way most species did. His kind entered a state of minimal consciousness for brief periods, but his mind never fully stopped working. This trait made him an excellent investigator, though it sometimes made him unpopular at social gatherings. He sat in his private office reviewing footage for the 100th time. The screen showed Ambassador Hyuk and his delegation from every angle. They walked the same routes every day. They ate their meals at the same times. They arrived at council sessions exactly 7 minutes early. Never 6, never 8. Computer, show me the timeline again, Brethen commanded. A holographic display appeared, showing the past 8 months of human activity. For the first 2 months, the humans had been everywhere. They attended cultural events. They asked questions constantly. Ambassador Hyuk had given 3 speeches about human philosophy and Earth's history. Mireille had participated in trade discussions with genuine enthusiasm. Then came the Confluence Summit. Brethen zoomed in on that week. The summit had been a celebration of galactic unity. Each species presented recordings of their finest diplomatic moments. The Velcris showed their peace treaty ending 2 centuries of civil war. The Metharians displayed their resource-sharing accords. The Lumens shared philosophical discussions about cosmic harmony. The humans had watched everything. Hyuk and his team attended every presentation, taking extensive notes. They asked to review archived materials. They requested copies of ancient treaties and historical documents. And then, exactly 1 week after the summit ended, they stopped talking. Brethen made a note. Connection between summit and silence. But what did they see? He decided to interview other species who had interacted with humans before the silence began. His first visit was to the Metharian sector. The Metharians were traders, known throughout the galaxy for their business acumen. Their representative, a being named Korthos, agreed to meet with Brethen in a private chamber. The humans were excellent potential partners, Korthos explained. His species communicated through a combination of sound and chemical signals, all translated for Brathen's understanding. They learned our trade protocols quickly. Very intelligent species. Did they say anything unusual before they stopped speaking? Brathen asked. Korthos paused, his sensory organs twitching. Actually, yes. Ambassador Hayuk asked me about our resource-sharing agreement with the Lumens. He wanted to know the specific terms. When I explained it to him, he asked a strange question. Which was? He asked, does this agreement actually share resources, or does it just share the word sharing? I told him I did not understand the question. He smiled politely and never mentioned it again. Brathen thanked Korthos and moved to his next interview. Over the following week, he spoke with representatives from 12 different species. A pattern emerged. The humans had asked similar questions to many of them. Questions about the actual meaning of treaties. Questions about whether diplomatic language matched diplomatic reality. Questions that made other species uncomfortable. A Lumen diplomat recalled, Ambassador Hugh attended our poetry reading. We shared verses about unity and cosmic understanding. Afterward, he asked if any Lumen had actually unified with another species, or if we just wrote poems about it. We found the question offensive. Brathen began to form a hypothesis, but he needed more data. He requested access to Earth's communication history with the Council. What he found was revealing. Before joining the Council, humans had submitted hundreds of questions. Most were straightforward. How does the translation matrix work? What are the trade regulations? What are the rules of engagement if conflicts arise? But some questions had apparently never been answered satisfactorily. How are treaties enforced? What happens if a species violates an agreement? Has any species ever been held accountable for breaking their word? The Council's responses had been elaborate and philosophical, filled with references to honor, tradition, and mutual respect. But they never actually answered the questions. They danced around them with beautiful language that said nothing concrete. Brathen realized something troubling. He had been part of the Council for 60 years, and he had never noticed this pattern. The Council was very good at talking, but it rarely said anything definite. He decided to examine the treaties themselves. He started with the Velcris Peace Accord, the one they had presented at the Confluence Summit. The document was 230 pages long. Brathen read through it carefully, something he suspected few beings had done. The treaty promised eternal peace between Velcris factions. But buried in Section 47, subsection 12, paragraph 8, there was a clause about defensive cultural preservation. It allowed military action if one faction felt their culture was threatened. The definition of threatened was left deliberately vague. In other words, either side could resume fighting whenever they wanted, as long as they claimed cultural defense. Brathen checked the Matharian resource-sharing agreement next. It was even worse. The agreement required the Lumens to share geological data about crystal formations. In exchange, the Matharians would share equivalent resources. But the definition of equivalent was subject to negotiation, and the Matharians controlled the negotiation process. The Lumens shared valuable information. The Matharians shared nothing but promises to share someday. Brathen felt something he had not experienced in years. Anger. He had helped negotiate some of these treaties. He had praised their eloquence and complexity. He had never realized they were meaningless. He went to see Chairman Thelvos with his findings. The chairman listened in his private office, his 6 arms folded in a way that indicated deep concern. When Brathen finished his report, Thelvos was quiet for a long moment. You are saying the humans stopped talking because they realized our communication is empty? The chairman finally asked. Not empty, Brathen corrected. Carefully crafted to appear meaningful while avoiding actual commitment. Every species does it. We have become experts at diplomatic language that sounds beautiful, but binds no one to anything specific. Thelvos moved to his window, looking out at the stars. But this system has kept peace for 3,000 years. Has it? Or have we just avoided war by never making any real agreements, by keeping everything vague enough that no one can be accused of breaking their word? The chairman did not answer. He knew Brathen was right. What do we do? Thelvos asked. I do not know, but I understand the humans now. They come from a world that nearly destroyed itself. They take words seriously. When they discovered that we do not, they decided silence was more honest than participation in our theater. Breathen left the chairman's office and returned to his own quarters. He had his report ready for the council, but he was not sure they would want to hear it. The truth was uncomfortable. Meanwhile, in the human quarters, Jiwon continued her daily routine of delivering meals. This time she noticed something new. The humans had covered one wall with paper notes, all written in their own language. She could not read them, but she recognized the structure. They were creating some kind of plan. She also noticed they had been studying videos of council sessions, watching them over and over. Specifically, they watched speeches that had been praised as masterpieces of diplomacy. Jiwon realized the humans were not just staying silent. They were preparing for something. They were waiting for the right moment to speak again. She wondered what they would say when that moment came, and whether the galaxy was ready to hear it. The grand chamber of the Nexus station floated in the darkness of space, a massive structure that had witnessed 3,000 years of peace. Inside, representatives from 47 different species gathered for another session of the Galactic Council. The air buzzed with translation devices, converting thousands of languages into comprehensible meaning. Delegates argued, negotiated, and debated as they always had. But something was wrong. Ambassador Hugh sat motionless in the human delegation's seat. He was a man in his 50s with silver streaks in his dark hair and eyes that revealed nothing. Beside him sat Mirai, a younger woman who served as his aide. Both wore simple gray uniforms and both remained perfectly still. They had been sitting like this for 6 months. Chairman Telvos watched them from his elevated platform. His 6 arms gestured in frustration as he tried to maintain order in the chamber. The chairman was an amphibian from the water world of Thelmar, and his species had led the council for 800 years. He was known for his patience, but even that was wearing thin. The chair recognizes the Velcris Confederacy, Telvos announced, his voice carrying through the translation matrix. A massive reptilian creature stood, his scales gleaming under the chamber lights. War Prime Kelton represented the warrior species of Velcris, and his patience had run out months ago. This council cannot function with silence in our midst, Kelton roared. The humans sit among us like stones. They listen to our secrets, observe our strategies, and say nothing. This is espionage, not diplomacy. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Several delegates turned to stare at the human section. Hyuk did not react. Mirai did not blink. A crystalline being floated forward, light refracting through its geometric body. The Lumen representative spoke in a voice like wind chimes. Perhaps the humans communicate on frequencies we cannot detect. Their silence may be their language, then let them say so, another delegate shouted. Telvos raised his primary arms for silence. The chair has sent 47 official communications to the human homeworld. We have received no response. We have approached Ambassador Hyuk directly on 18 occasions. He offers only a polite bow. The chairman's frustration was evident. In 3,000 years of council history, no species had ever simply refused to participate. Communication was the foundation of everything. Without words, there could be no negotiation. Without negotiation, there could be no peace. I propose we vote to expel them, Kelton said. If they will not speak, they have no place here. Before the motion could be seconded, an insectoid delegate raised its foreleg. Councillor Breathen was known for his analytical mind. His compound eyes reflected the chamber lights as he spoke. Hasty action would be unwise. 6 months ago, humans were quite talkative. They attended social functions. They engaged in trade discussions. Something changed. We should understand what before we act. What is there to understand? Kelton snapped. They mock us with their silence. But Breathen had already been investigating. He had spent weeks reviewing security footage and interviewing other species. The humans had been friendly at first, eager to learn about galactic society. Then they had attended the Confluence Summit, a gathering where all 47 species presented their greatest diplomatic achievements. The humans had watched every presentation, studied every treaty, and then they had stopped talking. I request 30 days to complete my investigation, Breathen said. The council has survived 3,000 years. It can survive another month. The vote was close, but the motion passed. Breathen had his 30 days. As the session ended, delegates filed out of the chamber in clusters, speaking in worried tones. Some glanced back at the humans who remained seated until the room was nearly empty. Then, moving in perfect synchronization, Hyuk and Mirai stood, bowed to the empty chamber, and walked toward the exit. Telvos intercepted them at the door. His translator worked perfectly, but he wondered if the humans could even hear him anymore. Ambassador Hyuk, please. Just one word. Tell me why. Hyuk stopped. For a moment, the chairman hoped he might finally speak. Instead, the human ambassador reached into his uniform and withdrew a small card. He handed it to Telvos, bowed again, and left. The chairman looked at the card. It contained a single human word written in their alphabet, with a translation beneath. Listen. Telvos crumpled the card in one of his hands. Listen to what? There was nothing to hear but silence. In their quarters, the human delegation gathered. There were 12 of them in total, all maintaining the same disciplined silence they had held for months. They communicated through hand signals now, a sign language they had developed specifically for this mission. Hyuk signed to his team. The pressure increases. Stay strong, Mireille signed back. 3 delegations have withdrawn from negotiations. The council is fracturing. A younger member of the team, Tai Yang, looked concerned. He signed, Are we certain this is the right approach? People are suffering because of the instability. Hyuk's expression softened slightly. He signed, Short-term pain for long-term gain. The council is broken. Our silence is the mirror that shows them their dysfunction. Across the station in the vast communication center, thousands of messages flowed between worlds. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific collaborations. But in the human section of the network, there was nothing. Earth had gone dark. Human colonies transmitted only the bare minimum required for trade. No entertainment broadcasts, no casual messages, no cultural content. It was as if humanity had withdrawn from the galaxy entirely. In the lower levels of the station, a young intern named Jiwon delivered meals to the human quarters. She was not human, but she had been assigned to support their delegation. She had tried speaking to them many times, but they never responded. Still, she noticed things. The humans were not idle in their silence. They exercised together with military precision. They studied data files for hours, and they practiced their hand signs constantly, refining their silent language. Jiwon wondered what they were preparing for. Back in the council chamber, maintenance drones cleaned the empty seats. The chamber had seen arguments between species that nearly led to war. It had seen tearful reconciliations after centuries of conflict. It had heard speeches that moved entire civilizations to change their ways, but it had never known silence like this. The humans had brought something new to the galaxy, something that terrified the council more than any weapon or threat. They had brought the possibility that words, the foundation of everything the council believed in, might not matter at all.